What's up, you beautiful people? Welcome to another video. So, a couple years ago, I read a book by Keith Cunningham called The Road Less Stupid. And in there, he talked about this procedure called thinking time. And the idea of thinking time is having a formalized process that you sit down and you think about whatever it is that you're struggling with in life. You have problems, you have things that you're trying to find solutions to, whatever. Like, thinking is the definitive distinction between people who are successful and people who just kind of go through the motions in life and never seem to really achieve their full potential. But the problem is thinking ain't easy, right? It's a pretty, by definition, pretty taxing endeavor. And what I find is that not a lot of people actually talk about how to think, right? They don't talk about like what is the formalized process for thinking. So what I want to give you here is actually a 10-step process that you can follow for thinking on paper. Because one of the first things I think that I had to learn on my journey is that you cannot just think in your head. That's just cycling, that's perseverating. It's not actually getting you any closer to a solution when you're trying to solve a problem. What ends up happening is people become lily pad thinkers, right? That's how most of us are thinking inside of our heads. We have chaotic jumble of thoughts that are bouncing around. They're flitting across the top of the water like lily pads. They never go deep below the surface. And anytime that they do go below the surface, your biological monkey mind says, "No, that's uncomfortable. I don't want to be under the water. I have to hold my breath. I don't like that. Let's go back up." And so now it goes back up to the top and it starts flitting around again, right? And this is why, like, for a lot of people, the best thinking that you ever do is when you're in the shower, when you have like this stimuli going on. There's not a lot else. There's just this warm water. There's just this white noise, right? Your mind is quiet and it can go a little bit deeper under the surface. But if you're just trying to do all your thinking in your head, you're gonna find it really, really difficult because you're gonna forget more things than you remember. And there's so many different complex data nodes that you need to connect. So first thing is that you actually have to do your thinking outside of your brain. You have to do it on paper. Like there's no other way around this. And the paper is a forcing function, or it could be a computer, right? Just any external medium. It's a forcing function for actually clarifying and giving yourself something concrete to start working with. Because I don't know about you, but for myself, if I don't put it on paper, I have a way of tricking myself into thinking that I've thought about a thing more deeply than I really have. But once I put it on paper, I realize how shallow the thinking is. So that's number one. We have to get it on paper. And the first activity then is a brain dump. And I like to just do this with my computer or my keyboard. You can do it with a pen and paper, right? Is just splurt everything that's flying through your head about the thing that you're trying to think about right now. But it doesn't just have to be about the thing. It could be about any other external circumstances inside of your life, just anything that's currently inside of your brain. We're doing this brain dump just to kind of clear the deck, get the noise to quiet down a little bit and say, okay, I'm not going to forget you, Mr. Random Thought, about the thing that the dentist appointment I have next Tuesday. It's right here. I don't have to worry about forgetting you. I'm putting you aside right now, somewhere safe and secure, and I'll come back and I'll get you later. But for now, you're over here, and now I'm going to move on to thinking deeply about this other problem that I have. Okay, so that's step number one. This is the brain dump. Step number two is actually defining what is the problem you are now sitting down to solve, or what is the idea that you want to think about. Like a problem well defined is half solved. A lot of times we don't actually know clearly what is the problem that we're trying to solve here. On coaching calls with even like my like 8-figure entrepreneur clients, the first question that we sit down on is like, what are we trying to do today? Like, what is the problem that needs to be solved? And the more clearly you can define it, the more able you are going to be to attack it and be able to understand all the variables involved with that particular situation. So what is the problem, or what is the thing you are there to actually think about? It could be, I'm here to think about like the difference and the impact of capitalism versus communism on human evolution. Cool, put that down, right? Like define what you are there to think about. Step three is ask yourself, why is this a problem? A lot of times when, again, with the coaching example, I'll say, what is the problem we're here to solve? Okay, we have a marketing problem. Why do we think this is the problem? Like, often we have ascribed something to be a problem, but we haven't really identified clearly whether or not it is actually a problem. And a lot of problems can be just solved by saying like, oh, this isn't a problem. We could just make that decision and say, we don't need to solve this. But if you are going to put your time and energy towards thinking through something, you need to get clear. You need to get to the root of like why it is actually a problem. And this is a process that the Japanese called the 5 whys. You just keep asking why, 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 why. For example, one of my favorite examples of this is like back at Escape, we came into work one day and a pipe had busted in the bathroom and it was leaking water everywhere. And our graphic designer was in there mopping it up, and the pipe was still leaking, right? And we're like, what are you doing? Like, why are you mopping the floor when it's still leaking? We got to turn off the water. We like solve problems in the right order. But when you look at the pipe and we ask ourselves, why did it burst? Like you could say, well, why is the water leaking on the floor? Well, there's a hole in the pipe. But why is there a hole in the pipe? Well, because the pressure in the pipe was too much, or the pipe was too old and it had rusted. Okay, but why was it too old, or why was there too much pressure? And what we found in that particular example is that as you went up the chain of asking why did this particular thing occur in the chain, it ended up going back to like the air conditioning, something completely unrelated. Like something about the air conditioning had been like creating this pressure differential in the bathroom, that then the water like was too cold for the heat, and then it was causing it to perspire, which then caused the pipe to like expand and contract, and then that caused it to fail. It was a really weird solution. I don't remember all the details of it, but it like had nothing to do with the pipe itself. It had nothing to do with the water coming out. But you keep asking the why to get to the root of like making sure that you're sitting down to solve the actual problem. Again, like a problem well defined is half solved. And so first, we take our best guess. Here's the problem that we're here to define or here to solve. Here's the thing I want to think about. And then you ask, why do I want to think about that? Why is that the problem? Why is that the problem? You keep doing that until you get to the bedrock. And then you go to step 4, which is you list out, just start brainstorming, what are all the solutions? What are all the different solutions that you can come up with? Be creative here, like think outside the box. Um, Ask yourself like, okay, of these solutions, what's the highest probability? What's the highest probability solution that would get me to my destination? What's the lowest probability? What's the most moonshot? Like if I knew I couldn't fail, what would I do? Like go through all of those scenarios. Keep framing like what are the different solutions that we could throw at this. The more creativity that you bring towards trying to solve the problem, the more raw material you're going to have when it comes to actually starting to manipulate them. So, what are the solutions? That's step 4. Step 5, this one's from chess, is once you have all your solutions and you think you have had your problem clearly defined and you've gotten to the root cause, you want to take a step back. You want to take a step back and you want to ask yourself, what am I not seeing? What am I completely missing? You want to go looking for what chess players call the next best move, right? Like in chess, like you're looking at a position, you're analyzing it, and you probably have these different candidate moves where like this is a good move, that's potentially a good move, that's potentially a good move, and you start calculating them out. And we tend to get our pet favorites. We're like, I'm pretty sure it's that one. And then you put on the blinders and you stop giving reasonable consideration to the other alternatives. And so it's just really helpful after you've already gone through your solutions, you've already kind of like put the blinders on, you started finding yourself to go down a path to intentionally pull yourself back to the beginning and ask yourself, okay, what am I not seeing? What if, what if somebody was to tell me right now that that's actually the wrong solution? Why would it be the wrong solution? Like once somebody tells you that the move is wrong, it's actually quite easy to figure out why it's wrong. Surprisingly, like this is why like finding cheating in chess is so difficult. It's because for a grandmaster, you don't have to tell them the right move. All you have to do is tell them if they're on the right track or not, and they'll go, oh. As soon as you tell them that they're not on the right track, they will figure out why it's not the right track. It's amazing. And so you want to go looking for a better move. Now you might probably won't find one, but the exercise of trying to find one sometimes will surface a better solution, and it will give you a more robust, full 360 picture of the thing that you're thinking through, the problem that you're trying to solve. Next, step 6. We have our next move. We looked all through the next best moves. Now it's important that you calculate until the very end, until you see the win. Again, this is from chess. We call this concrete calculation. In chess, when you have the right move, like to know that it's the right move, and a lot of times you just use intuition. You just kind of know from pattern recognition that this will get me to a position of advantage, and from there I should be able to convert this into a win. But some situations you need to have a concrete analysis of the situation, and the only way to do that is to think through each move in the sequence until it gets to the win condition, until you get to checkmate. So do not go sacrificing your queen until you can calculate clearly to the end of the line. If I sacrifice my queen right now, then in 7 moves, I will have checkmate. If you can't see the checkmate, you do not sacrifice the queen. And so at this point in the process of thinking on paper, you want to calculate all the way to the end of the solution that you've defined. Where does it ultimately lead in that equation? That right there is very, very difficult. Most people will think they've calculated to the end, but they'll only have gone 2 or 3 steps down. They'll get a little bit loosey-goosey. They'll assume the win condition is down there. But what ends up happening, and this is what we call second order, third order, and fourth order consequences, is most people, they think in terms of what happens and then what happens next, second order consequences. The really high level thinkers, and the gift of doing this on paper is that you can go to the third order, fourth order, fifth order consequences. Okay, I did this and then this happened. And then what happened as a result of this happening? And then what happened as a result of this happening? You want to calculate that as far out as you can. And you can do this pretty well with paper, but only if you're actually using your thinking noodle to do so. So that's step number, what we're at, 6. Okay, step number 7. Now this is where we start putting this whole thing into a package, into a container that you can carry with you, because there's no point in thinking deeply about things if you're just going to forget them in the future because you haven't created hooks, mental hooks for you to carry these ideas alongside you into the future. One of the reasons I think people think I am an above average communicator is because I do these next 3 steps, whereas most people do not. And so what ends up happening is all the thinking that I do always gets packaged up. I always put them into little containers. And so that when I'm in a conversation, when I'm shooting a video like this, if I'm on a stage and somebody asks a question, I have a whole library of briefcases. And each one of those has a story, it has an idea that I've already thought deeply about, that I've already figured out why is this a problem. I've thought through the solutions, I've looked for the next move, I've calculated it concretely to the end. And so I can pull that off the shelf. I can open it up and be like, well, let me tell you, I've already thought deeply about this, right? So step 7 then is you create an analogy. It's really important that you create an analogy. Humans are great pattern recognition machines, right? So after you've thought through this whole thing, you're thinking about the relationship between communism and capitalism, right? Now you want to think of an analogy that is something like that, but from a different scope of life. Like maybe the relationship of communism and capitalism is actually a lot like a relationship with an ex that you had, or a conversation that you had with your dad, or something about F1 racing. I don't know. Like think of an analogy outside of the context of the thing that you were thinking about that's like that, so that you have a visual comparison that you can pattern recognize. Use your pattern recognition powers to meld those two things. And once they meld, this is where people think that you're a genius. So you take an idea over here and you meld it with something over here, and they go, I've never thought of that before. And it's like, because you did it intentionally for them. And now it gives them a hook because they're already familiar with this concept over here. They don't want to sit and do all the heavy thinking that you did, right? You can take this complex idea and package it around an analogy that they're already familiar with and then hand it to them. So that's number 7. Give it an analogy, compare it and create a pattern here. Step 8 is then to name this thing. Like that might sound crazy, right? But like giving something a name gives you, like, if Anuj is sitting behind the camera right now, if Anuj didn't have a name, I wouldn't have a good, easy way to talk to him or about him. I'd just be like, you over there, that guy. No, not that guy, that guy, right? Like names are power. Names are powerful things. And if you can name the ideas, the things that you've been thinking about, like this could be the F1 framework of communism. You're like, what the fuck is that? I don't know, but it's interesting. It's an interesting pattern, and you're gonna remember it because it's so interesting, right? So give something a name. A name is like a handle for the briefcase, the container of the idea that you created. You put the idea in a container, you got your analogy, the name is the handle that allows you to carry it with you. So when you're on stage, somebody says, hey, what do you think about communism capitalism? Well, I'm gonna tell you about the theory of F1, F1 theory of communism, right? Boom, got my handle. Step 9. This is, okay, now we're getting like deep into the weeds here, but like if you want to be like a high level thinker, this next step is pretty powerful. Take the idea that you've already thought through, the problem that you've already solved, and then visualize it. And what I mean by that is create a visual framework for it. Turn it into a shape and turn it into a line, a path, a roadmap. Turn it into a triangle, turn it into a square, turn it into a prism, into a diamond, whatever. Like take the idea that you've thought about and try to pair it to a visual hook. The power of this is most ideas that you think about, once you've created the analogy, you've named them, you've created these patterns that you've connected with other complex ideas. Once you've done that, most things can be distilled down to like 3, 4, 5 different core ideas that can then be transmuted on top of a visual. The power of that is it's really easy in the future for you to draw it out. Like instead of retracing the complexity of all your thoughts around this thing, you could just have a shape, boom. Let me tell you about the story wheel. Boom, 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 boom. There's all these different points, right? Let me tell you about the seven figures storytelling script, right? 9 boxes, boom, 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 right? All of the ideas that I have, I sit down and try and figure out, okay, if I was to visualize this so I could write it on a napkin for somebody, what would that look like? What's the simplest shape that I could create for this thing? That's a surprisingly hard exercise, but incredibly powerful. And it will allow you then, and in the same way, now when you go into your closet with all your ideas are all in these containers, now you can look at them based off of the shape of their containers. You got all your triangles over here, you got all your squares over here, all your lines over here, right? Like each one is a unique framing mechanism for the idea, the thing that you already thought deeply about. And then the 10th and final, and maybe the most important step of this entire thing, is you have to save all of your thinking here, the name that you gave it, the the shape, the analogy. You have to save it all in the form of a story. You have to sit down with the whole thing and tell it in the form of a story, because story is how we make sense of the world. It is how we communicate most impactfully with other people. And so if I really want the power of my thinking to have an impact on the world, not just on other people, but on yourself as well, you have to be able to frame it in the form of a story that you can retell to yourself and to others in the future. And if you do that, it's a lengthy process. I do not recommend that you do this for every thought that goes through your head, but maybe once a week, sit down. One of the forcing functions for me is these videos. This forces me to sit down and actually think deeply and create these frameworks for you guys. In the same way, coaching gives me that opportunity. But even when I was not doing this stuff, even when I was just running businesses, I would still sit down each week and try to think deeply about one aspect of the business. And I would try to go through and say, like, let's brain dump this. What's the problem? Why do we think this is the problem? What are the solutions that we've considered? What's the best move here? How can I calculate this all the way to the end? How can I create an analogy, a name, so that I can teach this to my team so that they can understand it? How can I visualize it into a shape? And how can I save this in a story for maximum impact? You do that consistently every week for the next year, you are going to be a much sharper thinker, and people are going to think you're genuinely way smarter than you are. At least that's been the case in my particular life. So take this, run with it. Let me know what you guys take from this. Put it down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.